The heat on Hyralis never truly slept. Even at dusk, when the twin suns dipped beneath the shattered obsidian cliffs, the air shimmered with latent warmth, rising from the glass-covered dunes like breath from a dreaming beast. The moon's surface was fractured, scarred by a cataclysm no historian remembered and no native dared name. Yet it was home, at least for Soren Vel, the flame sculptor. His studio was half buried in rock, walls reinforced with cooling spines and mineral-infused resin to prevent collapse from the heat pressure. Rows of glowing creations lined its shelves, molten flame captured mid-spin in glass, swirling ribbons of orange and violet, some still flickering softly inside. Art, the traders called it. Memory, Soren would whisper to himself. He had not seen another Emberian in over 3 cycles. Perhaps they were gone. Perhaps they simply avoided him, sensing something fractured in his energy signature, something lonely. Emberians didn't often live alone. But Soren was not like the others. He wasn't even sure he was whole anymore. Tonight, he worked late. The sculpture in front of him, a delicate spiral of flame infused with sand crystals from the dunes, refused to balance. He murmured to it in clicks and flares, the Emberian way, trying to coax harmony. It refused him, burning too hot, then sputtering out. He sighed. The air stilled. The silence felt wrong. Then the sky cracked. A streak of fire tore through the atmosphere, not his, not the crafted kind, this was wild, uncontrolled, loud. A ship, spiraling, screaming, descending fast. Soren stepped outside in time to watch it vanish behind the cliffs to the east. He waited for the explosion. It never came. The wreck was nestled between 2 sand ridges, barely visible under a veil of settling dust. It hadn't exploded, miraculously. It hadn't even scorched much ground. The cockpit glass was fractured but unbreached, the hull bent and singed. Soren approached slowly, flame flickering faintly along his wrists in instinctive defense. A figure lay slumped inside, tangled in control fibers and emergency foam. She was small, not Emberian. Maybe aquatic. Her skin shimmered like moonlight underwater, pale with hints of teal, hair floating despite no water present. Alive. But fading. Soren flared brighter, fingers melting the cockpit seal with precision. The emergency systems hissed, releasing her, and he caught her as she collapsed forward, her body surprisingly cold against his fire-warmed arms. He did not know her name yet. But something in her unconscious form made his fire steady for the first time in days. She woke at dawn, surrounded by flame sculptures and desert stillness. Her first breath was slow, cautious. Then panicked. Soren raised his hands in peace. You crashed. I pulled you out. You're safe. Her eyes blinked, round, sea green, pupils expanding with uncertainty. Her voice was soft, soaked in exhaustion. Water. He handed her a crystal flask from his stores. Purified, untainted. Her hands trembled as she drank. I'm Soren, he said after a moment. This is Hyralis. What's your name? She hesitated, like it cost her something to say it. Leora. Your ship. Wasn't mine, her gaze drifted. I escaped. The vessel was stolen. I didn't know how to fly it properly. A fugitive. Soren didn't press. He had seen enough hollow-eyed refugees pass through Hyralis to know when someone needed quiet more than questions. You can stay, he said instead. Leora looked at him for a long time, like no one had ever offered her that before. In the weeks that followed, they learned to share the silence. Soren taught her how to shape flame, though her waterborne body never responded to the heat the way his did. She watched instead, fascinated, and offered observations that made his work sharper, more balanced. When he burned too hot, she reminded him to breathe. When she grew cold from the endless dry, he embedded small warmth cores beneath her cot. They did not talk much, not at first. But their gazes lingered. His fire pulsed warmer when she entered a room. Her silences softened around him. Eventually, he asked, "Who were you running from?" She touched her chest, where a faint lattice of glowing veins shimmered. They called it a gift. Engineered empathy. A hybrid design for peacekeeping in high-tension zones. But when I refused to weaponize it, when I felt too much, they tried to recycle me. Soren's fire flared in anger. "You're not a machine." She looked away. "I'm not sure they agreed." He stepped closer, gently touching her shoulder. His fingers were warm, but not burning. "I do." The desert bloomed once, briefly. It happened only once every 100 cycles when Hyralis aligned with its sister moons. Bioluminescent spores rose from beneath the sand like floating stars. Soren had never seen it in person. Most Emberians traveled off-world for trade or pilgrimage. But that night, Leora woke him, pulling him outside in silence. The dunes were alight with sapphire glow, her eyes full of wonder. This is what I always imagined freedom looked like," she whispered. He looked at her, haloed in alien starlight, and said, "This is what I imagined you looked like." Her breath caught. She stepped closer. Their kiss was tentative at first, fire meeting cool mist, but it didn't consume. It balanced. Like his sculptures, finally finished. But peace never stays. A signal beacon flared in the wreckage of Leora's ship. It had activated despite their efforts to dismantle it. Now, a long-range pulse echoed across the void. Someone was coming. "They'll find you," Soren said, the fire around him already crackling higher. "They'll take you." "Then we run," she said simply. But Soren had never left Hyralis. Leora held his hand. "Then let me show you what freedom looks like." He hesitated, then nodded. And just before they climbed into the repaired scout vessel, just before the first stars of pursuit blinked into the sky, Soren turned back and watched the firelight on the dunes. "Goodbye," he whispered to the home that had once been his prison. And hello to the woman who had taught him how to burn without breaking. The orbital station above Rallos Prime looked like a rusted wheel abandoned by a god. Namir's soul squinted at it from the pilot seat of Wraithlight, one boot up on the dash, fingers drumming across a cracked control panel. The station had no active transponder and only one functioning docking arm. Lights flickered across its midsection like a dying heartbeat. "This looks like a good way to get knifed by a repair drone," he muttered. But the job was simple: deliver one cryopod, get paid, ask no questions. The pod currently sat in his cargo hold, glowing faintly. He hadn't peeked. Didn't care to. He ran things, not people. This one had been a favor to a contact on Velron's belt, good money, decent bottle of synth-aged Rysek whiskey as a bonus. But something about the way they'd said "don't thaw her," not even if the pod starts beeping, had lingered in his skull like static. Namir brought the ship into dock manually, avoiding the automated port that had once been used by the upper-tier cruise liners before the war. It was all dust and forgotten names now. As he prepared the cargo release, the warning tone echoed through the hold. Vital signs destabilizing. Auto-wake sequence initiated. He froze. Damn it. He could override it, sure, if he wanted to cook the occupant from the inside out. Instead, Namir watched as the cryopod hissed and cracked open. A woman gasped and sat up, coughing hard. Her skin was pale with the frost of suspended life, her dark hair tangled with ivy-like bio threads embedded along her collarbone. Her eyes, sharp, green, unblinking, locked on him. "Who the hell are you?" Namir raised his hands, palms out. "Just the delivery boy. You weren't supposed to wake up." Clearly, she pushed herself to her feet, wobbling slightly before steadying against the pod. "Where am I?" "Rallos Orbital 12. Or what's left of it." Her gaze narrowed. "This isn't Lab 10 on Sylvain. And you're not a Federation officer." "Nope. Independent contractor." Freelance lifter. Name's Namir. She looked around the dim cargo bay, absorbing every detail like a scanner. Then she turned back, voice sharper. What's the date? Cycle 4847. She swayed slightly. I've been under for 2 years. Namir frowned. Your client said 3 months. Who hired you? He hesitated. A woman named Sarah from Velrin. Iviara blinked. My sister. Then we're good, yeah. You're awake, and I didn't defrost you wrong. Win-win. She stepped forward, her expression unreadable. You transported me cryogenically, didn't inspect the pod, docked at an unregistered station, and clearly weren't given a proper handoff protocol. Namir rolled his eyes. If you want a 5-star rescue, next time don't fall asleep in a science coffin. A pause. Then, I need a comm access to Federated Net. He snorted. Welcome back to the galaxy. No one gets access to Federated Net out here. Station's dead, comms are ghosted. And my ship's only got short-range ping. Iviara exhaled slowly, jaw clenched. You don't get it. They lied. I wasn't in cryo for safety. I was silenced. By the 3rd day, she was still on the ship. Namir didn't like passengers. Didn't like company. But she fixed the faulty nutrient line in the galley without being asked and recalibrated his biofilters so they no longer smelled like scorched algae. So, he let her stay. Iviara spent hours rerouting data cores and rebuilding a miniature hydrogarden in the storage alcove. She didn't talk much unless she was explaining photosynthetic modulation, which, surprisingly, he found himself listening to. She learned he drank only once a week, kept a broken starfighter helmet in his bunk, and ran routes others avoided. He never said why. What made you a smuggler? She asked one night, as they shared rehydrated stew and rare silence in the dark. He looked at her, his eyes shadowed. Same reason you got frozen. Someone wanted me quiet. On the 7th day, they reached a repair outpost. The plan was to drop her off. But Iviara didn't disembark. You're being followed, she said. Namir's stomach turned. How do you know? Because they're after me. And you're the only witness left. The ambush came in orbit above a gas dwarf called Kethra Minor. Pirate tags, high-frequency jammers, no warnings. Namir fought with everything he had, turning Wraithlight into a blur of plasma trails and evasive spins. Iviara, meanwhile, dumped experimental algae bombs into the propulsion vents, flooding the enemy sensors with radiation signatures. They shouldn't have made it. But somehow, they did. Barely. When the dust settled and the stars returned, Namir was bleeding from a burn above his eye. Iviara's hands trembled as she reached for his face. Let me help. Don't touch me. He saw her flinch. And regretted it immediately. She sat beside him anyway, dabbing at the wound, her fingers sure despite the hurt in her eyes. You're not alone anymore, you know, she said softly. He stared at her, fire and guilt tangled in his throat. I don't know how to do this. You don't have to, she said. Just don't run when you feel it. Feel what? She leaned in and kissed him, not urgently, but as if she already knew what he tasted like in a dream she'd been chasing through stars. They didn't talk about the kiss. But everything changed after it. He let her fly the ship once. She fell asleep on his shoulder. He brought her nutrient cubes shaped like tiny hearts and pretended he hadn't when she noticed. They made a plan, not to run, not to fight, but to expose everything. Her research, her memory logs, the experiment that tried to mold empathy into a weapon. They would leak it, together. People will come for us, Namir said. They already are. We may not survive it. Iviara took his hand. Then let's die telling the truth. In the final scene of Part 2, Wraithlight glides silently toward the shadow of a shattered relay beacon, their last chance at transmitting the data dump before the black ship's return. Namir looks at her in the quiet before the chaos. If I don't make it. Don't, she cuts in. Just kiss me. And he does. As the stars burn behind them. The echo glass cathedral on Selvine was broken. Its towers had once sung into space, not metaphorically, but literally. Made of resonance-sensitive crystal harvested from the moon's subterranean caverns, the structure translated cosmic movement into song. Pilgrims came from across the galactic web to feel it resonate with their bones, to stand in that sacred silence and listen to the language of the void. But now the cathedral was cracked. Its notes rang dissonant. The war had not reached Selvine directly, but shockwaves from orbital detonations had splintered its harmony. So the song weaver Ilmari was sent. Voxian were not builders. They were memory bearers, their voices carved moments into the air like etchings on glass. Ilmari arrived in silence, gliding across the moon's windless plains in a pressure shell of silver, his throat already humming with tension. His first surprise, the cathedral was not empty. Someone else was already there. A humanoid figure in battered armor knelt near the shattered chorus chamber, gently brushing crystal fragments into a pile. His hair was dark and disheveled. A blade, old, uncharged, ceremonial, rested across his knees. He didn't turn when Ilmari approached. "This is sacred ground," Ilmari said, his voice woven through a chord of gentle caution. "Then you shouldn't be here either," the figure replied. Ilmari tilted his head, focusing. His voice curled outward in a probing phrase, identity query, tone neutral, non-hostile. The stranger looked up. "Kalen," he said. "They. Or just, Kalen now." The name sang with a memory Ilmari hadn't expected, a knight of the ninth blade. Disgraced. Listed among the lost. "You were presumed dead," Ilmari said. Kalen shrugged. "Aren't we all, eventually?" Ilmari had not come to argue. He had come to listen. And so he stayed. Kalen did not ask him to leave. And Ilmari did not question why the knight repaired crystal he could never fix alone. Days passed. Ilmari slept in the east alcove, where sound still carried in fractured arcs. Kalen made food from stasis rations, silently placing a share before Ilmari each dusk. Ilmari responded with small songs, first one of mourning, then one of patience. They lived beside each other, not yet together, bound by proximity and something older than logic. On the 12th day, Ilmari asked the question he had waited to ask. "Why are you here, Kalen?" The knight's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Because when the cathedral fell, so did the voices. And if they stay silent, everything we fought for becomes a lie." Ilmari absorbed that, not just the words, but the chords beneath them, guilt, devotion, love buried like a fault line beneath stone. "You're not here to fix the crystal," Ilmari said. Kalen nodded. "I'm here to fix myself." They worked together then. Ilmari taught Kalen to resonate. To hum just so into a shard, until it trembled with memory. Kalen taught Ilmari how to fuse crystal using kinetic pressure, creating new notes from broken ones. Sometimes, Ilmari would sing without words, just tones. One night, Kalen sat in the ruinous chapel and said, "Your songs, they feel like drowning. And breathing again." "That is what remembering is," Ilmari replied. On the 23rd day, Kalen showed him the sword. "I wasn't supposed to keep this," he said. "I was supposed to break it the day I left the order. But I couldn't." Ilmari circled it, letting a soft tritone shimmer in the air. "There is blood in it still," Ilmari whispered. "I know. But also love." Kalen met his gaze. "I know." Ilmari stepped closer. "I can feel it." "Can you?" Kalen's voice was rough. "Or is that what you want to feel?" Ilmari hesitated. Then placed his fingers, delicate, jointless, against Kalen's chest. A cord unfurled. The sound was raw. Imperfect. Human. But real. I feel you, Ilmari said softly. Kalen didn't kiss him. Not then. He simply laid his forehead against Ilmari's and said, "Don't leave when it's fixed." Ilmari's voice trembled. "Then don't fix it too fast." The cathedral center chamber was the last to heal. Ilmari stood in its heart, layered with refit crystal, and sang. Kalen joined him, not with trained voice but with rhythm, palms against the floor, boots thudding lightly in a ritual beat. Their song rose. And the cathedral woke. A burst of harmonic resonance bloomed upward, and for the first time in 3 years, the echo glass cathedral sang to the stars again. It was not the old song. It was new. It was theirs. The Federation sent an envoy the next cycle. Offers of restoration. Promises of archival access. Ilmari declined. Kalen stayed. And when Ilmari sang to him now, the notes were full of light. Not memory. But hope. Ravana Kir hated Velkarith. Too humid. Too many moons. Too many memories. She kept her hood up as she stalked through the soft-soiled streets of Carol's settlement, the last place anyone should expect a former bounty hunter to tread. But she wasn't here for a job. She was here for him. She found him in the same place the report said she would, an open-air clinic built from salvaged shuttle parts and ivy-covered comm towers. He looked older now, less fragile, more grounded. His dark curls were still an untamed mess, and he still wore his medical tunic half unfastened like he never had time to breathe properly. Kyle Wren. The man she had been sent to kill 3 years ago. And the only one she hadn't. She didn't approach at first. Just watched. Watched the way he touched patients' hands when they cried, how he laughed like he didn't deserve joy but took it anyway. How he limped slightly on his right leg, a legacy of a plasma burn from some long-forgotten skirmish. She told herself she'd come to tie up loose ends. But when he turned, just once, and looked directly at her across the crowd, like he knew she was there, she vanished into the trees like smoke. They met again that night. His voice caught her just as she leapt from a rooftop to vanish again. Ravana. You came. She landed hard, claws digging into the stone. I should have finished the job. But you didn't. Maybe I wanted to see what the universe does with mercy. He approached slowly, his limp more noticeable in the moonlight. And what do you think now? Ravana's tail flicked once. Still deciding. They walked. Not because they wanted to, but because neither of them could bear the silence of a room. He told her about the serum, the one that could rewrite immunogenetic pathways. The one he stole from a lab that wanted to weaponize it. The one she was originally hired to retrieve, or terminate. I didn't mean to disappear, he said softly. I meant to find a way to make things right. Then, you let me go. I didn't do it for you. He looked over. I know. But it saved me anyway. Ravana didn't sleep in the village. She made camp in the forest beyond the settlement, under the smallest of Velkaritha's 3 moons, the Hunter's Moon, the elders called it. He found her there on the 4th night, carrying a pouch of spiced tea and a datapad with diagrams she couldn't read. You trust me enough to track me? She asked as he approached. He sat beside her, uninvited. I trust you enough to know you wouldn't get me unless you meant it. She smirked. Rare. Brief. But he saw it. Besides, he added, you always made better tea than me. She didn't ask how he remembered. She didn't want to admit that she remembered everything too. On the 6th night, they kissed. Not because of nostalgia. Because his hands were shaking from overwork and her mind was screaming to feel something other than regret. Because their hearts had never stopped being tethered across time and silence. Because survival meant compromise, but love meant surrender. It wasn't passionate. It was desperate. And it was real. Trouble came on the 8th cycle. Not hunters. Scientists. The ones he'd fled from, the ones who had patented empathy, branded it, turned it into a weapon and called it medicine. They came to reclaim his research. And to erase him. Ravenna met them at the edge of the settlement with her blades drawn. He's not yours. The leader, a tall woman with mirrored eyes, tilted her head. And you? What are you? Bounty hunter, deserter, lover? Ravenna bared her teeth. His shield. You won't survive this. Then I won't die alone. The fight was brief. Ravenna was faster. But there were more of them. A blade found her side. Another grazed her ribs. Her tail lashed, claws singing through metal and bone. But she was bleeding. Badly. She fell. And Kyle, reckless, stupid, beautiful Kyle, ran into the middle of the storm to cover her. When the smoke cleared, Ravenna was unconscious, but alive. The attackers were not. Kyle's arms shook as he carried her back. He spent 2 days at her bedside. And when she woke, throat raw, side aching, he was asleep in a chair beside her, holding her hand like he'd never let go again. She whispered, "You still make terrible tea." His smile was tears and joy and exhaustion. "But you drink it anyway." They stayed. Together. Under the moons of Velkarith, where guilt faded and love could grow in the soil of second chances. Ravenna never returned to bounty work. Kyle never ran again. Some nights, when the third moon rose and the wind was quiet, she would trace the scar on her side and whisper, "You were always the one I couldn't let go." And he would reply, "You were always the one who didn't."